like MJ was kind of like a basketball god in like the early 90s. Do you think this game would have necessarily done better if he was in it, or do you think it was good enough in its own right to where they didn't really need him?
I think it absolutely would have done better.
Okay.
That being said, I think 90s NBA, that's like the heyday, that's the absolute height of popularity for NBA.
Is that the golden age?
In my mind, 100%, 90s is the golden age, because you look, there's incredibly talented and interesting players everywhere.
It's June 19th, 1993. Nearly 20,000 people are packing the America West Arena in Phoenix, Arizona. They and millions of fans at home are about to experience basketball history in real time. Game 6 of the 93 NBA Finals. Phoenix Suns tussle with Chicago Bulls. First to 4 wins is crowned champion. Bulls are up 3-2 right now. The Suns not only face a team coming off of 2 consecutive championship wins, they're up against a basketball god. Michael Jordan is unstoppable, scoring more than 30 points in each championship match. He slammed 55 in Game 4 of the finals, nearly half of his team's total score. The Suns might have Charles Barkley and Danny Ainge, but neither could beat the King of Hoops. The Bulls start Game 6 with a strong first quarter, leading the Suns 37-28. Suns work to prove their worth as powerful stars, scraping paint into their nails as they claw their way to a humble lead. Bulls struggling in the fourth. So they run a play called Blind Pig, leading to a flawless pass to John Paxson, sinking a 3-pointer to win the game by 1 point.
Take a 1-point lead, and Phoenix calls for time with 3 seconds.
A matter of seconds kept the Bulls from an arduous Game 7, winning the championship for a 3rd consecutive season. It took a team effort to slam the victory, laying on the foundation of Michael Jordan's 33 total points. This is becoming another golden age for basketball, elevating it to one of the most popular sports in America. It's partly due to NBA's God. The only thing that can slow down a god is himself.
I think we've gone through a lot. Me personally, I've gone through a lot of ups and downs, but to cap it off this way means a lot to me.
Michael Jordan announced in October of 1993 he's retiring from basketball, saying he lost his desire to play. There are still rumors suggesting his extreme gambling led the NBA to secretly suspend him, but those are denied by the league commissioner. Jordan said the recent death of his father moved him to step back, later pursuing minor league baseball. But even without its king, the excitement of basketball still swirls in the US, and now it's arcades. A bright orange 4-player cab lit up halls across the states starting in the spring of '93. Perhaps what's more astounding than its game design prowess is its financial performance, beating the gross sales of Jurassic Park by a mile, exceeding $1 billion in its first 12 months.
It was the biggest movie in the world. Like, it was everywhere. Like, I was in Pakistan, and we had Jurassic Park fever over there. Meanwhile, NBA Jam, an arcade game that you have to actually physically go and put money into every time you use it, was making $1 billion.
That's 4 billion quarters. I mean, it's crazy.
A renaissance in the gaming industry would explode onto the scene.
One which employs lifelike digitized graphics.
It's a season without end.
The game was a turning point. It was revolutionary.
At all of our test locations, NBA Jam is collecting between 124 and 167% of what Mortal Kombat did during its first 6 weeks.
This is bad, man! This is bad!
That created a lot of anticipation for the home versions.
High-flying, rim-rocking, slam-jamming action.
But you don't just watch them, You control them. You are an NBA All-Star.
Welcome to NBA Jam!
Sneakers scrape the asphalt along the roaring train-side streets of Chicago, put to the tune of rhythmic dribbling players, not wearing jerseys, but whatever they pulled out of the dresser that morning. These are the roots of NBA Jam. It's emblematic of how popular basketball is in 90s America, and it's also where Midway found its pro players.
Yeah. You look up at the ball.
Urban athletes are seen here inside Midway Studios during the early production stages of their upcoming basketball arcade game. At Classic Game Postmortem 2018, Chief Mastermind Mark Turmel said he searched far and wide for these two men.
Good. So I was cruising around YMCAs and, in kind of the inner parts of the city trying to look for some talent. Found some guys, paid them some money to come into a studio and said, hey, we want to shoot you to do this, we'll pay you this hourly rate.
And also, watch the ball. Yeah, look up at the ball.
They're on camera doing a vast variety of basketball moves.
No, I think we're fine here. Yeah, that's all right.
Midway's doing more than use this as reference material. This is the material.
Digitize this footage into individual frames.
These developers are well known for the digitized graphics in Mortal Kombat, splicing up images of real actors and putting them into a fighting game.
How do you feel about cutting his head off?
The Midway Williams Combo Company also did this with T2 and Narc. By the early 90s, their arcade hardware is pumping more than enough color palettes to make this look good.
We had the ability to put 256 palettes of 256 colors, which if we were creative enough could make, pretty much make it look like unlimited colors on the screen. So it gave us the ability to get all these beautiful flesh tones and all these beautiful highlights.
But in this basketball game, they made the mistake of using a blue screen and blue outfits. It wasn't very well lit either.
So we had to hand cut out every frame of animation on every character for every single animation. We'd go through and pixel by pixel.
That's going to take some manual labor. But they eventually pulled it off, individually splicing every animation frame from these players before putting them on the court. In a matter of years, these men went from local street ballers to international video game all-stars. From the neck down, that is.
Williams Electronics is currently developing an arcade-based 4-player video basketball game.
It's 1992. Midway/Williams is trying to get an NBA license. They're using this pitch video to convince them it'll be worth their money and won't tarnish the brand's reputation. Execs at the association associate arcades with rundown trash joints where tattoo-covered heathens use drugs. So despite this darling video presentation from Midway, the NBA rejected them. No license.
I was surprised at the reason they rejected us. They basically said, we don't want our NBA logo in these seedy arcade locations. But their reference point was Times Square in New York City. Because that's where their offices were. And at that time, there in the 80s, Times Square was very, grungy, a lot of, prostitution, a lot of drugs, and a lot of that was happening at these 24-hour...
And if you're a corporate NBA guy, where are you hanging out?
Right.
So they put together a second video in a bid to convince the NBA that not all arcades are seedy piss joints. It shows arcade machines in family-friendly places like bowling alleys and entertainment centers. The video doesn't survive today, but that's what it showed. Looking at the extensive research by Rayon Ali in NBA Jam the Book, Midway paid the NBA an undisclosed amount of money, plus promising a $100 royalty per cabinet sold. As part of the agreement, the league could pull this license if they ever found NBA Jam in a seedy piss joint.
And it worked.
Midway became the first and only company at the time to get the NBA license for a video game. It's said this deal took Roger Sharp about 9 months to finalize. Getting this license is a major victory for Jam.
Like, it's huge. Honestly, I think that's one of the biggest reasons that Jam was so popular, is people could play as their actual favorite teams with the players.
My resident Chad and local champion, Tito, of Hall of Game fame, says such a license was not common back then.
If you go back even like, I think the NES era, ton of sports games, but only a handful of games that had real players.
Those street-side basketball stars are about to get some new heads. With the way it's set up, they need head pictures from about a dozen different angles per player. That's 54 heads, since they're using 2 players per team. Should be easy. Just call up the NBA and they should have them, right?
We were asking for source material, like, can you take photos of the players? Back in those days, there were no NBA photos they took in, preseason camp.
Yeah. All right, no photos. Maybe they can go take the pictures? No, they're not doing that either. Things were a little more guerrilla in the Wild West of the 5th gen. They had to go find the heads.
If you're making a video game with the NBA now, they probably have a massive library of like headshots from every angle, high-tech mocap stuff, all kinds of stats, anything you want. But back then, you're making this game, and one of the first games to actually have player faces in the game, like actually in the game, which is a really big deal. So Tony Goski was this really talented artist, ended up, having to use reference materials like basketball cards, basketball magazines, whatever he could get his hands on, like stopping and like looking at like newspaper articles, pausing tape.
Slides. There was no internet, so we had to go to the store and like, okay, let's look through these, these oh, cool, there's a head angle here that we could use.
It might have been easier to just invent the internet. Go get all the
We should have totally done that.
Yeah.
It was an insane task, taking months to find and clip these headshots, then attach them to the street ballers, who are now able to celebrate their appearance in the game like Mike Wazowski. While Goski handled the head snipping, Turmel, Sean Liptak, and Jamie Rivet were programming a phenomenon in fast-paced gameplay. They're drawing inspiration from some of their own arcade classics, including Arch Rivals, a 2-on-2 basket brawl.
I'm open!
This doesn't use any official players and is more of a comical beat-em-up than a proper sports sim. The idea with Jam is they want to mirror real-life basketball without being too realistic. It needs to keep players enthralled from the first quarter to the final buzzer. Besides, what's the Nemen 1 rules of remember about playing basketball?
Have some fun.
As Ollie writes in his book, it was a typical Chicago evening in 1992. Turmel, DeVita, and the gang are taking a build of Jam to a 6-foot-tall cabinet in the halls of Dennis Place for Games. This is not an official street release of the game, but more of a field test. These Midway developers are going to light up the machine and observe.
And we stand back and we watch. We turn it on and we
local
watch.
arcades.
Local arcades.
Local arcades in our area.
Yeah.
Patrons gradually approach the sticks, drawn in by the NBA logos and 4-player setup. Faces lit up at the sight of their favorite NBA players, further pumped at the chance to become them. It's a hit. Soon, crowds watched, some waiting in line for their chance to play. Others were slightly upset at their favorite player stats, but there was one problem in particular that sticks out to Turmel. One person who got confused.
He tapped the player 2 start button. Boom, 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 boom. He took his coat off, set it down, but then he lined back up on the machine and he lined up on station number 3. Just so you know, you're actually on player 2. See these, it says insert coin there on station 3. You're on these controls. And he's like, oh, okay, sorry, thanks. And he shifted over, and I went back to Saz, man, that's embarrassing. How are we gonna fix this? And we kept watching. And about 45 seconds later, he's playing, and he stops, and he shifts back over to player 3.
You're this one, idiot!
So they put in idiot boxes, color-coding which player is on which joystick, also putting in hints on how to play the game.
And it worked.
Moons later in early '93, Jam hit the rest of the arcades.
Welcome to NBA Jam. Here's the tip.
Thumpy music, punchy sounds, and an announcer pumped with Red Bull and Sweet Tarts lather this fast-paced action with a style only experienced on this digital court. Simple controls let you dunk, shove, and pass, leaving a wide-open canvas to splatter the paint with your own plays. Non-basketball heads get a fun game they can quickly understand, while hardcore fans see real projections of their favorite players. It's a 2-on-2 game across 4 3-minute periods. If you don't have 4 bodies, the computer will play that character for you. There's always going to be 4 players on screen. Controls are easy. Only 3 buttons: turbo, shoot, and pass. When not holding the ball, you can try stealing it by pressing pass or blocking shots with shoot. Holding turbo and pass lets you shove people. You can knock them down while they're mid-dunk, if they're holding the ball, or if you just want to clear them away from your teammate. There's pretty much never a time where you can't push people over. Like usual, shots from here score 2 points, while shots outside this line snag 3. Taller players tend to be better at dunks and closer shots, while those shorter dudes are way better from a distance.
He shoots from the outside, and it's good.
Holding turbo speeds up your player, letting you perform sky-high dunks you won't see on television.
That's why I love it, is because like you just feel like a superhuman when you're playing this game. 200 feet in the air, slamming it unbelievably hard. Catch me putting on cat ears and a skirt after this.
Like NBA Jam is perfect because you get like, I look at it as like you get the highlights of basketball. You know what I mean? Like you get dunks, you get amazing passes, you get these 3-point shots that are just crazy. You get all these things, you get these crazy calls without all the stuff in the middle. You don't get fouls, you're not getting a lot of downtime. And when it's 2-on-2, it just moves so fast.
There's a sense of hyper-realism. In most versions of Jam, the timer's actually faster than a real 3 minutes. Turmel and his team are making it speedy and quick without going too overboard. He says before the final build, passing originally stopped the receiving player. They soon realized the receiving man had to keep moving while getting the ball in order to keep that on-screen action fast. Bah, bah, bah. They wanted this thing to be all gas, no brakes, some Andrew Callahan action but without the Hoff twins. A seamless gameplay experience, finding the balance between realism and cool factor.
What made this so popular with like people who just hate sports games?
Well, I think if you look down at your hand, that's the answer.
Oh,
there's
right
2.
here?
Yeah, there's 3 buttons. One makes you go fast, one makes you shoot, one makes you pass, and then on defense, one knocks the shit out of people. It's just super simple. It takes all the rules out of sports. Like there's basically 2 rules here: shot clock and goaltending.
Hey, that's no fair. They're not playing by the rules.
Actually, that is fair.
If you want to break more rules, set yourself on fire. Making 2 shots in a row with the same player without your opponents making a shot in between gets you heating up. You'll hear Kitzrow let you know. 3 in a row sets you on fire. Your ball combusts, letting you make a shot from pretty much anywhere, burning the net clean off.
The best part about being on fire, there's no goaltending.
It's bending the rules of the sport and laws of physics, bringing millions of bodies to the joysticks, while raking in millions upon millions of quarters.
Hey Mark, give them a frame of reference. Like what did the average game make?
It's there on the screen. So the number 2 game is, virtual racing.
The major claim to financial fame is collecting a collective $1 billion in quarters in its first 12 months, beating Jurassic Park's first year in theaters. That only accumulated $346 million.
You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Turmel says each cab cost just under $4,000. That sounds costly, but Jam was a steal of a deal for any arcade boss.
Well, the operator, the owner of that device, can pay it off in a couple of weeks, and then it's pure gravy from there forward.
Operators can expect to recoup their initial investment very rapidly. The rest is pure profit.
Many arcade goers of the time talk about frequent lines in front of the machine. One of the NBA stars Ollie spoke to said even he had to wait in line to play the game he was featured in.
Then I got some players involved. Like I got Glenn Rice, who was a big fan of the game back in the day. He played on the Miami Heat when the NBA Jam came out, and he would go wait in line at the arcade in Miami to play as himself on NBA Jam. I'm like, that's crazy. Like that's a certain level of like, yeah, like when it's that big that, you know, you're waiting in line to play as yourself. And like, I just blew my mind.
But not every pro appreciated the cab. Turmel says many of the NBA stars who got a free machine also got mad.
$3,500, $3,900 piece of equipment, but they were mad. Every single one of them I talked to was mad because either they weren't in the game because I had selected the wrong players, or they didn't like their stats.
An easy pill for Midway to swallow, since they can take that pill with a sip from their swimming pool of money. You can't talk about Jam without bringing up the cornerstone of its style, the man behind the mic. Tim Kitzrow's lines are iconic. In a Reddit AMA, Turmel said they gave Kitzrow some lines and categories, but a lot of his catchphrases are sheer ad-lib. They worked hard on keeping lines special, making sure the big ones never get overused.
Did you originate Boom Shakalaka?
I wish I did.
Okay.
But Sly and the Family Stone, Boo Shakalaka Laka, Boo Shakalaka.
Okay.
But I'll take credit for it.
There was one line cut from the final game, found in the files by the cutting room floor.
Get that shit out of here!
Wonder why they left it out. Nearly every game feels like a close match thanks to its really well-known rubber banding. This bridge between skilled players and newcomers allows pretty much anyone to enjoy NBA Jam. As Random Radical Man says,
"This is bad, man! This is bad!"
Remember, in the 90s, bad equals good. Midway made a commercial arcade masterpiece, but they're only heating up. Doing big business means doing big expansion. The billion-dollar empire is about to be on fire. Midway can't port its own games to home consoles, since they're too busy making games. So they're outsourcing NBA Jam ports to Acclaim. Acclaim can't port Midway's games to home consoles because they're too busy making... So they're outsourcing the ports to Iguana Entertainment. Acclaim gets this chance to jam since it built so much goodwill with Midway. That's thanks to the Mortal Kombat ports.
Try to find a different publisher, a home publisher to work with to then bring their games home, because Midway didn't have the capacity for that back in the late 80s, early 90s. And then lo and behold, like Midway makes Mortal Kombat and Acclaim has the right of first refusal. So of course they're going to adapt it. And it, makes all this money, gets all this interest. So they knew they wanted to do the same thing with NBA Jam.
Acclaim is acting more like a publisher in this scenario, hence the strange tree of company authority going on. While they're not developing the actual port themselves, they are taking care of the marketing and overall publication, often spending millions on ad campaigns.
Jam. There'd be like a budget, and there would be like a timeline. So like, let's say, your Acclaim, you've got the rights to make the home versions of NBA Jam. Now, you're a publisher, granted. You're not actually developing these. So what you do is you find different individual software houses that you'd work with. Like there was Probe Software, which was one. And there was Iguana, which was another. There's a whole bunch of little ones out there. And it would be based on who can get it done the fastest and who can get it done for as much money as we're willing to give them for this project.
One of the many people Ollie interviewed for his book is Jay Moon, a former Iguana developer. Unfortunately, Moon is no longer with us today. Ali was gracious enough to share his interview with J. Moon for this video, giving us a window into what making these ports was like. J. Moon's journey through the industry begins on paper, helping start the EGM magazine in the late 80s. He has a knack for programming, so he later moved to Sunsoft, developing Aero the Acrobat. At the dawn of the 16-bit era, he left Sunsoft for Punk Development, eventually taking a few co-workers with him, forming Iguana Entertainment.
When you start a company like that, we started off with 20 people and then we moved them all out to Austin, Texas. But you have to wear a lot of hats when you're starting the studio. There's a lot of the quagmire you can fall into and get lost. But we mostly found our way, and we did a lot of work.
Using his bottomless bag of industry connections, Moon and the Iguana Gang started doing business with Acclaim, and ports of games like Super High Impact.
We were making money enough to keep our doors open. Acclaim liked us a lot because we were doing stuff on time.
Acclaim would soon offer the Mortal Kombat games to Iguana, but their president turned it down.
Big mistake. Big mistake. But, Ken Lobb came out, our buddy, and he said he didn't like it and all that, and we didn't know. So they finally came and they offered us NBA Jam, and we jumped on it. Okay? And that's how our relationship kind of started with this whole NBA Jam business.
Welcome to NBA Jam!
They were given a harsh time frame, often less than a year for less than a handful of people per port.
These guys were hustling. So, Iguana, I don't think they get enough credit for how hard they worked and for how good they turned out for as short of a time they had.
He's on fire!
The pressure of this huge game that's super popular that will sell. Even if it was the worst game, NBA Jam would sell. Shaq Fu, not a great game, but obviously it sold because Shaq was on the box. That would sell no matter what. Same with NBA Jam, but they also wanted to make a good version of NBA Jam, something that people would really get into.
Iguana's ports turned out to be playable, successful, and most importantly, profitable.
Our first run, we did the Super NES version, Genesis version, and the Game Gear version. And within a year worldwide, we sold a bit over 4 million pieces. That was pretty much a Cinderella story.
This is the first major success for this relatively new American development house. Taking a look at the 16-bit ports, it's clear these machines just won't pull off arcade perfection, but they play well. These still feel like Batman. Genesis and SNES is where many Jam big heads got their start with the franchise.
How many rounds of this game do you think you played?
Oh, hundreds. On the SNES port, I beat every single team.
My real affection for it came from a Tournament Edition on the Sega Mega Drive.
Iguana taking this load off Midway's shoulders is giving them time to make an updated Jam for the arcades. It's not a sequel per se, more of an update. The Street Fighter II Turbo of its Street Fighter II. This is before the age of annual Madden games, pioneering what would become a sports game trend. This is NBA Jam Tournament Edition.
So Tournament Edition has a few quality of life updates. There's a tournament mode that turns off all of the gimmicky stuff. But the biggest thing is it's just an updated roster. That's the biggest part because nowadays with NBA 2K, you see a new game coming out every single year, and really the biggest change is that the rosters are updated. Well, back then that wasn't really the case.
Now jammers get at least 3 players to choose from per team, up from 2. You can sub them out in between periods.
What state does question mark come from?
That's actually an unlockable team. It's NBA rookies.
Okay.
This new set of players gets unlocked if a player profile beats all 27 teams with no cheats.
One thing to keep in mind is there is an injury stat. So every time you get pushed over,
what does that do?
There's a chance that your injury stat goes up.
Okay.
It starts at 0 and it scales up. It'll affect your speed. It'll affect really everything about you.
Subbing out injured players lets them heal up for a period or two, building their strength for the late game. That way you can reforge your glass cannons.
The higher your power is, the slower your injury builds up. So like with these speedy guys, if you stick with them the whole game, they might not be speedy by the end.
This injury stat is hidden on Arcade's TE, but some of the ports show this in between periods, including Saturn's. Some even show other stats you don't get to track on the cabinet. There's also loads of extra cheats and bonus players.
Yes, there are a lot of secrets. Bill Clinton, of course, playable character.
That's right.
Like Tournament Edition's predecessor, it too needs console ports to maximize fat wads of dosh. Though Iguana will need to outsource itself to get those jobs done.
But without those home ports, NBA Jam wouldn't have been nearly as popular as it was.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's half an audience that goes back to the arcade version and all this, but then there's a totally different segment, or at least an overlapping segment that goes back and says, like, man, I love playing it on my Super Nintendo, or I played it on my Game Boy, or on my Sega Saturn, or on my, like, God, they had like a gazillion versions.
Saturn's NBA Jam TE has no credits. Neither does the PS1 port. Both ports share the same hidden messages on the game disk files, properly crediting team members from Midway, Acclaim, and Iguana Entertainment. I reached out to several people who worked for Iguana, asking who did the Saturn port. Some did not get the message, others responded, saying they're not the guy. In most cases, one person handled a single port, with some supplemental support from other team members. For example, Steve Snake made the 32X port mostly by himself, reportedly pushing the metal to its limits. Fun fact! He also made the Kega Fusion emulator, and has the coolest name of any video game developer, objectively. Non-Iguana man Adisak Potanayan made the Jaguar TE, commonly labeled the best port by Jam fans. He did such an outstanding job that he still works for Midway. All games have Iguana team members as secret characters, though they don't do much to specify full names or roles. These are just hints. But a character named Tunnicliffe is unlocked with the initials SAT. Coincidental initials? A cosmic sign? J Moon and his team are hungry for expansion. They shipped the company down to Austin, Texas in 1993, right before acquiring England's Optimus Software, rebranding it Iguana UK. It's around this time when Acclaim first assigned ports of NBA Jam. Iguana split the consoles among both sides of the roaring Atlantic.
We were working some here in the United States, some over in the UK, so I would just, I had to average it out and say about 10 per platform. But for the Game Gear, that's not true. A guy named Chris Kirby programmed the Game Gear, and this guy was a prince.
A British one-man army, isolated in his own country, porting the game by himself. Chris Kirby is the classic computer whiz kid.
The Aquarius home computer system comes with all this and...
Kirby tells me he started programming as a child, learning BASIC at 8 years old with a Mattel Aquarius.
Our first computer was given to me by one of my sister's boyfriends at the time, husband now, was this like Mattel Aquarius thing. So it was just, it had no games, you couldn't buy games for it, and it was like rubber keys.
He soon upgraded to a ZX Spectrum, picking up assembly. But mind you, there's no internet, and very little in the way of coding classes for kids. So Kirby turns to the one place where you can learn anything and be anyone.
At your local library.
And I discovered that you could like order books. If you knew the ISBN number, you could order these books. And I guess no one was ordering books, so I just started like putting in like tons of requests. I want this book, I want this book. And so my little local library had this like amazing computer section because of all the books I kept ordering.
By his late teens, this Middlesbrough library became a proverbial school of computer programming, with one student.
Want to know how to be the hottest kid at school? Well, first you say, "Hey Eddie, what sort of computer have you got?" When he tells you, you say, "You mean, it's not an Atari ST?"
Kirby upgraded once again, this time to an Atari ST, making hacks and games. At age 16, he dropped out of school and made his way into business programming classes. Lacing up his Atari ST projects, the young Kirby is using connections from the class to plant his foot firmly in the door. He might not be old enough to get a tattoo or go to the pub, but he is old enough to get hired at Codemasters.
Well, I can do that. I'll write 68,000. Yeah, I'll do that. So they hired me. Yeah. So I was like, woohoo, got a job out of this. And it was like a youth train scheme. So it was like 50 quid a week or something they'll pay me.
Ever hear of the Game Genie? This is Kirby's first big project at Codemasters.
Game over? No way! Because we got Game Genie. We tell you when it's over.
With Game Genie, I decide how many lives I get.
I use it when I want to live forever.
He helped develop the device, making a zillion hacks and codes. Throughout this, Kirby published a game on the ST, then got scooped up by Optimus Software.
You'd think it would be like, the swanky offices in London or in like, California that we were writing. No, but we were in a shithole office in Middlesbrough, 14th floor of Church House. Like I mean, like Middlesbrough is like a really like run-down city. I was working on Game Gear, writing some conversion of some really terrible Game Gear game that never got released. I think someone found it actually. Someone found it and released it.
What game was it?
Big Nose the Caveman, I think it was called.
Okay, I think
Game Gear version. Yeah.
This brings us back to Iguana, buying Optimus for its UK branch. Kirby's first mission under this reptilian brand, port NBA Jam to the Game Gear, by himself. It turned out alright, given the obvious limitations of this early 90s portable. He was given a short amount of time to pump it out though. Some hardcore fans will notice weird things like John Stockton having blonde hair, likely caused by color palette limitations. Even Kirby admits it's a rushed port job, but Iguana would give him more flexibility with Tournament Edition.
With all those new routines, that's why there's such a massive difference between the two Game Gear versions from NBA Jam to NBA Jam TE. That I really tried my best on the TE version of Game Gear.
It was a noticeable bump up. Reviewers and players liked it a lot more, still created by a one Kirby army. Then came time for the bigger guns. Iguana has a reputation with Acclaim for doing good work in a relatively short amount of time.
Back then, in 8-bit games, it'd take you a year, 10 to 12 people. We were coming in sometimes in 6 months, 7 months on these games, and we were on time. And so we had a really good relationship with us. I mean, and it was a good and a bad because, they kind of thought of us as their rainmaker, so to speak, because we're doing these games on time so much and so fast. But then they expected it all the time.
Except this upcoming job is a little different. For Genesis, SNES, and certainly Game Gear ports, there's a level of de-making going on, fitting the arcade game into a machine with lesser specs. Tomorrow's machines are making arcade perfection more possible. In early 1995, Iguana UK gets tasked with porting NBA Jam Tournament Edition to PlayStation and Saturn, starting the process before either console comes out. Sony and Sega are giving British teenagers pre-release dev kits.
And I'm like traveling to work on a bus with my backpack with like a prototype PlayStation 1 in my backpack, so I took it up to and like it was such a strange position to be in. We were writing on cutting edge hardware, like brand new hardware. And I was thinking, like, I remember sitting on a way to work once, looking like there's some kids like sat in the bus, and I was thinking, the shit that I've got in my backpack, they're going to go mental force.
He and his buddy, Darren Tunnicliffe, are working on the two ports.
18, 19. Big daft kids, man. Big daft kids getting paid silly money.
So the Brits were making basketball.
Okay.
But that's okay.
Right.
The way Kirby explained it to me, he's focusing on PlayStation's Jam, and Tunnicliffe is tackling the Saturn conversion. Ladies and gentlemen and non-binary pals, behold, the man who created Saturn's NBA Jam TE port. Darren Tunnicliffe spent the past 26 years hiding in the shadows of a game with no credits. Not only are you gazing at the creator, but also his axe. Kirby tells me this is the computer Tunnicliffe used to write the Saturn game. What a beautiful keyboard. Unfortunately, both Kirby and I are unable to get a hold of Tunnicliffe, better known by his nickname, Daz T. But Kirby does remember a lot about both his PS1 game and Daz T's Saturn port. Both friends worked together, building their jams alongside one another. Both games share a lot of the same code. Everybody at Iguana got the NBA Jam TE source code. This ain't Virtua Racing. While the source makes mimicking a game a hell of a lot easier, Midway's foundation was difficult. Kirby tells me it's a complex assembly code for a Texas Instruments processor.
And NBA Jam wasn't like really neatly written. It was like little function, this does this, little function does. It was one big, massive function that just jumped around, and it ran it 4 times, one for each player. So it was basically one big giant function called 4 times, and that's how it worked. And it was just this massive monolithic function.
Kirby spent lots of time converting this large assembly source code to the C programming language. This conversion is used as the base for both jams. Many PlayStation games use C, while Saturn games are a spattering of both C and assembly. Generally, assembly gets you more mileage with Saturn hardware than C. Japanese and British devs tend to favor assembly, while C was overwhelmingly popular in the States. The control code for both ports is primarily in C. With the source translated, it's time to get it running on the consoles. This is Kirby's first PlayStation game. Looking for inspiration on where to get started, he went through an early developer's demo. This shows what the PlayStation can pull off, famous for this moving 3D T-Rex model. But dinosaurs are not clicking with Kirby, no. He and Daz T are far more interested in the PlayStation's balls.
It was just a ball going bing, bing, bing on a blue background. And we're like, oh, that's impressive. And then you pressed it up. And another one appeared. It was a little counter, 2. Aha, right, okay. Keep going. Ding, it's like 5,000 and the screen's full, 6,000. And then, and it's like 60 frames a second. And it like at 8,000, it suddenly went into 2 frames. So we dialed it back a bit until we found it was like 8,000 something. And we were like, fucking hell. 8,000 16x16s in a frame. We're like, Christ. The whole company, we're all just like jaw dropped.
The hacking skills he picked up at Codemasters are being put to use yet again. Little by little, Kirby applied Jam's code to the balls.
And that demo became NBA Jam because what I did was I changed the balls to long lines of like, I'll fiddle with the code, that's how you do it. It was a bit of code that worked. So you start like hacking the code and work out what it can do. Like now the long, thin lines, 1 pixel high, right? Okay, now stop the bouncing, put them lined up, trying to find the graphics for the court. And then you can draw the court and the court is now can slew. And it's like, this is it. And I still can draw another thousands and thousands of polygons. And so that's how it started, and that became the court.
Remember, there's no pre-designed engines like Unity here in the Wild West of the mid-90s, so starting from these types of tech demos was a semi-common practice, according to Kirby.
Actual executable, when you compiled it, we called itself balls. Balls. So I never changed it.
I got to think of an appropriate way to phrase this question. You'd mentioned that you'd shared some code with Darren. Is the Saturn port of NBA Jam Tournament Edition based on the foundation of its competitors' balls?
No, because that's the hardware bit.
Okay.
See, the bit me and Darren shared was the control code, the bit that made it NBA Jam. So it was how the players run around. The bit around it, the bit that displays the graphics and does the sound, we had to write individually. But we just had this main lump of code that we shared together.
Shared like the conversion from assembly to C.
Yeah,
you didn't share your balls with Darren.
No, never do that. It's a terrible idea.
Turns out balls are not easy to transplant.
Balls was the PS1 engine.
Right.
And Darren did the same thing. He found another demo on the Saturn and made the engine.
Kirby doesn't recall what dev demo Daz T used, just that he also built the translated control code onto a Saturn demo. There is a balls.bin on the Saturn port's disk files though I doubt this has any relation to Kirby's balls. It's difficult to figure out what Saturn tech demo DazT is using. I do not believe it hails from a Sega Graphics Library demo, since that didn't start hitting the wide developer sphere until late 1995, right around when these ports are due to come out. He's possibly using something from an early Sega developer technical support kit. He did tell me they got a very early demo of Virtua Fighter for the Saturn. Could you imagine if that's what he used to translate Jam? I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but regardless of how it was applied to Saturn, both do share the same control code, and both are made by the same two people at around the same time. Despite the bitter hardware competition, the two ports are like close relatives. This code is in C, but they did use some assembly for the graphics in-game. To fit everything into the system's memory constraints while maintaining a good frame rate, many of its graphics are compressed. Throughout the early and mid-90s, a giant amount of developers are already using Rob Northern compression. It's used for a variety of visual assets in video games, generally yielding a 3-to-1 compression ratio. The images unpack quickly and don't eat up all your system resources while doing so. Many UK developers use Rob Northern compression. Former Traveler's Tales developer John Burton describes it very well in his YouTube channel. I recommend giving that a quick watch. To sum it up, the images are stored small, then stretched when used. It's a little more complex than I'm making it sound, but again, his video describes it well. Kirby and DazT want to use this, in the menus and on the court. Only problem is, this code hasn't been converted to PS1 or Saturn. To get Rob Northern compression on both consoles, one would need its source code. Lucky for Kirby, he happens to know a guy. Rob Northern.
So I said to Rob, you let me convert it, give me the source code, I'll convert it to PS1, and then you let us use it for free in NBA Jam, and I'll give you the source code for PS1, you can give it to everyone else. And he was like, fair enough. So I did that. So in R3000 assembly, I wrote a Rob Northern depacker, and then DazT does the same for his SH2, and so we use that. So everything was Rob Northern packed, and then one per frame we would depack it with and that was the only bit of assembly we wrote in the codes.
He says the video game industry is like a small town where everybody knows everybody, particularly in Britain. Sharing ideas and code is a way of the business here. Apes together, they make a strong jam.
We had a Genesis dev kit set up running the Rob Northern, and then we would step line by line go through the depacker until it was exactly the same and we got the same results out.
Evidence of Iguana UK getting Rob Northern compression on 5th gen hardware occasionally surfaced over the years. The people over at the cutting room floor found Rob Northern compressed player portraits in the PS1 game's code. It's also seen in Turok of all games, developed by Iguana. RetroReversing.com found it is used in the N64 game, with its code referencing a PlayStation unpack code written in assembly. A ding ding ding! All signs point to it coming from NBA Jam Tournament Edition. The two friends are also controlling gameplay frames in the same way. A razor-sharp eye can see the Saturn port is running at a very steady 60 frames per second, though not everything operates at the buttery smooth 60. If you look carefully while stepping through frame by frame, the court camera moves at 60. Players physically travel at 60 frames, as well as the ball when it's midair. But the player animations update at a slower frame rate, allowing Rob Northern to depack the graphics.
I think both have converged with the same. We could only update one every 12.5. Each player could only update 12.5 frames a second, because on each frame we would depack one player's graphic. So one graphic could change per frame. So you'll never see, if you step through frame by frame, all four players change their animation frame at the same time. It'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can only get 12 frames a second out of that.
It's as if each object takes turns changing its animation frame prioritizing a certain player right when its direction or action changes. Kirby tells me you will never see all 4 athletes change animations at once.
If you did them all at once, if all 4 did it once, then that one frame would drop and it would be all stuttery horrible. So he's trying to smooth it out.
Again, that's both ports using the same animation technique. Both are also using just one processor. Throughout this series, Saturn's notorious dual processor is repeatedly brought up. It's one more than the single PS1 processor, so it might sound like an advantage. But fully using that lone fire is far easier than using both Saturn's SH2s. They feed into the same memory bus, meaning they have to take turns. Many Western developers I spoke with could only use one of the 2 processors.
We discovered that, because they'd hacked in another SH2 really quickly. If one was like reading memory, the other one just stopped, was stalled. There was no cache at all on them. So I'm sure, I think we did. In the end, the SH2, second SH2 on the Sanford just sat infinite loop. Because if you used it, we tried putting the graphic decomp pack on it, but it would just stop the other processor. It was actually quicker to just infinite loop it, so it didn't touch the bus.
Cooking with both fires just isn't feasible here.
One SH2.
Yeah, wow.
I'm sorry, Saturn people.
No, it's okay. You're forgiven.
But it doesn't necessarily need both processors.
Fantastic!
They coded highly efficient ports of NBA Jam TE. In a follow-up email, Kirby tells me neither of the ports are demanding on the hardware. He says if they really wanted to, they could get the PS1 port running at 120 frames per second. Of course, the hardware locks at 60, but still.
Camp.
They're both based on the same code, so they should be pretty much the same. Though we can see some minor differences after tearing them down. When powering up Saturn's Jam, a few screens for the various companies leading this game are shown. Then we get to that smashing start screen music. It's impossible not to have an involuntary response to this killer soundtrack. What a baller introduction. If you sit idle, it moves through more screens, showing things like the players in this port, or tips and tricks. Your gameplay options are pretty much the same as in the arcade, with a few more accessible features. The options menu lets you adjust the speed of the timer, CPU difficulty, and the other gameplay modes. Juice mode amps up the speed of every player. Hotspot mode puts in extra point spots. And you can choose to include power-up icons, which are exactly what you think they are. I had a lot of fun messing around with these modes. Good way to change things up, especially in multiplayer if you're getting bored of the game. Which, that's kind of hard to do. In tag mode, you can play as both of your teammates, so a player with a computer-controlled teammate would gain control of them whenever they have the ball. At the main menu, head-to-head mode puts a 2-player game against each other, while team game puts both humans on the same team. On the court, it's the same heated 2-on-2 action you can expect. At a quick glance, this does not appear to have any serious downgrades from the arcades, unlike the 16-bit ports of yesteryear. A default control scheme lets you use the C button for turbo, or instead hold R, allowing you to press shoot and pass while in turbo. The Saturn's comfortable controller and buttery smooth D-pad complement Jam's rapid movement. You still get the excellent music, coupled with Kitsro's booming chords. Though something about this sounds a little quieter than the arcade OG. It's the sound. There's not as much of it. Right away, I noticed no shoe squeaks. The Saturn's crowd is also not as vocal as the arcades. They still cheer and boo at appropriate moments, it's just not as often. Like in all other ports of TE, you can play the titular tournament mode. Enter your initials and birthday to create a profile, where your wins, losses, and other stats are logged. On this profile, you will play your way up the list of teams from least popular to most.
Tonight's matchup, Rocket versus Warriors.
Beat all 27, and you're crowned champion. This expands the roster, gifting each team more people. Rookies are already unlocked by default on console, but playing as them doesn't count towards the season. Sometimes my computer teammate will just stand there and do nothing for a few seconds once I pass them the ball. Like, move man, what are you doing? What are you waiting for? NBA Jam is providing a tense rivalry between the PS1 and Saturn crowds, along with more friendly competition between Kirby and Tunnicliffe. After sharing the same base code, two Iguana brothers are going mano a mano. While fishing through forums and comment sections, many say they prefer Saturn's Jam over the PlayStation's. We already saw the Saturn's hand up on Parodius. It's true, the Saturn wins many of its console war battles when it comes to two-dimensional sprite-based games, though that isn't always the case.
Scottie Pippen. Wasn't there some kind of like tagline?
First off, let's go over the roster differences. Like most ports of Jam, both are different from the arcade's roster. Between Saturn and PlayStation, I could only find one difference. Orlando Magic player Brooks Thompson is on the Saturn's rookie roster. He's not on PlayStation. This might be because the Saturn port came out slightly after the PlayStation's. So already, Saturn's winning in player count. While comparing the roster heads on the Team Select screen, both look nearly identical. These are both coming through on RGB SCART cables fed into an OSSC upscaler into the same capture card. Admittedly, my capture card could use an upgrade, but rest easy, knowing both are coming through on the same types of video signal into the exact same equipment. The heads on PS1 appear to come through with ever so slightly more clarity, though some of the PS1 heads appear to have more decompression weaknesses. Stepping frame by frame, Saturn's Team Select has a single frame of garbled junk while loading images, but it's virtually unnoticeable when watching at regular speed, so this is really not a problem at all. If we take a look at Isaiah Riders starting behind the tip-off, the face appears to have more features on PlayStation, but the Saturn's body animations look more clear and defined. Throughout gameplay, animations play out the same way in both ports, just like Kirby explained earlier. It's moving at 60 frames per second, with athlete animations at roughly 12.5 FPS. They both share this performance. It appears neither of them drop a frame. The resolution on PS1 is ever so slightly taller than on Saturn, but both are way smaller than the arcade original. Because of this, the action is more zoomed in on both 32-bit ports, but this means we see more details on the players than in the arcade version. When a game loads on Saturn, it fades from black.
Here's the tip.
On PlayStation, it's an abrupt cut. The main menu theme is slightly different in both. Same song, same melodies, but listen closely to the PlayStations. Do you hear that trumpet sound? It's significantly quieter on Saturn. I kind of like this version better anyway. Sounds a little less busy. When starting a game, the PlayStation makes you sit through a lot of loading screens, and they take a while, loading the initial entry and a big long loading sequence for the game itself. There's also no music at Team Select. On Saturn, you don't have to sit through any loading screens to enter initials, and the music keeps pumping. You get to the game much faster.
Here's the tip.
Strangely, on Saturn, there's input lag when entering your initials, so be careful on this screen. The PlayStation port's Game Over screen has a screenshot of the final game frame. No other version of Jam does this to my knowledge. Saturn's Jam gives us a closer view of the basketball court, allowing more detail for the sprites. Because of this, you will find many of the players look ever so slightly more detailed on Saturn, though bigger is not always better. Because the camera is closer to the paint, the HUD on top showing player names and turbo bars gets in the way more often.
Excuse me, Witherspoon!
It's also spaced out more than the PlayStation's HUD. It doesn't get in the way so much that it becomes a serious problem, but you do get a slightly better view of the action on PlayStation's wider court. Also due to the text taking up less real estate. On Saturn, the full motion video that plays during halftime and after the fourth quarter are the same, whereas on PlayStation, they're different. But who gives a shit about FMVs? This is not important. It's worth noting, the Saturn's jam has transparent shadows beneath the players. Transparent graphics are known for being more difficult to pull off on Saturn, so many devs resort to using mesh, thinning out the pixels like chicken wire. True transparencies take some programming trickery, which DazT seems to have accomplished. A small amount of other transparent graphical features are missing, noticeably the ball flames. Here in the PlayStation, it's bright, proud, and truly transparent. Whoosh! Just look at the gorgeous fire. You still get a bright yellow ball on Saturn, some smoke trails, and a net burning, but it's just not as much fire, and in my opinion, not as cool looking. In fairness, it does look similar to the arcade's flame. Another odd difference. This security guard in the background is surrounded by a dark box on Saturn. He looks normal on PlayStation. I'm getting nitpicky with this one, but it is an odd difference. In the arcades, when your baller does an inhumanly high dunk, cameras flash in the stands, capturing this breakthrough in the laws of physics. On PlayStation, same thing happens. The screen moves up with the player and cameras start flashing left and right. On Saturn, this does not happen. Your player makes the dunk with no camera flashes at all. Overall, the colors look brighter on PlayStation, and some of the court lighting appears to be more vibrant than on Saturn. I have to talk about the pacing. Yes, periods do run on a 3-minute timer, just like the arcade, but in these ports, it's a slower 3-minute timer. Because of this, games take longer on the default settings and can feel like a slog by comparison. Slog is not a word one should ever use when describing NBA Jam. So, pro panda tip.
Here's the tip!
I highly recommend speeding up the timer to the fastest setting. This makes pacing closer to the speed of the cab and will make your jam sessions more fun. Speed of the timer on both ports feels the same. Again, they're using the same base code. Sounds are slightly different. Same soundtrack, same Kits Row voice samples, but the audience sounds and other impact noises sound different.
Is it the shoes?
Not sure which one is better per se. I think the PS1 port might have those shoe squeaks, but if it does, it's really quiet and really hard to hear. On Saturn, I believe Kits Row says the names of the players more often, even when it's just a simple pass.
Richmond, Simmons!
This might get irritating to some people. So when comparing the two, it's really tough to say which is actually better than the other. The PlayStation has more graphical features like the flaming ball, and some of its head sprites look more clear, though Saturn also has its fair share of stronger sprites, boasting better looking bodies. Both sprite scale very well, both have parallax, and the backboard's perspective turns as if it's a 3D object. They are functionally the same. Both have computer opponents who occasionally stand there and do nothing like a dumb bucket of bricks, and both have that same close match rush seeping through Jam's pixels, provided you speed up the timer. It really comes down to graphics. While there are very few noticeable differences, I think the PlayStation port has the edge.
What? Is that secret Sony fanboy talk? What the fuck?
Saturn surprisingly falls flat here. This beautiful basketball fire and the camera flashing bring Kirby's port closer to the arcade. The wider view and smaller HUD make the action easier to see. It also doesn't have the bizarre security guard box. That being said, I personally prefer the Saturn port, mainly because of this thing. PlayStation's D-pad is a blister factory. Most Western Saturn players of 1995 had this odd glossy first model pad, but it's still way better than Sony's Punji Pit. I've been playing with the Miracle D-pad, and it works great with Jam's rapid movement. The Saturn also has more flexible save memory for keeping multiple profiles, fewer loading screens, and one additional basketball player. So quantifying which one is the overall best really depends on your personal preferences. There's one major thing setting the two apart. The opponent AI on PlayStation is much more aggressive. I mean, like, physically aggressive. My guys are constantly getting shoved, pushed, knocked over mid-dunk, crowded by other players.
Excuse me!
Even after turning the difficulty down, they bring constant hurt.
Excuse me!
Compare these PS1 injury stats to Saturn. They're not necessarily harder to play against. It just forces you to fight shoves with shoves, closing off many of the play strategies you might be used to on other platforms. Sorry, Muggsy Mains, this port is not for you. Take a look at these Saturn match halftime stats right after I played a bunch of PS1 rounds. You can tell, it taught me to get more handsy.
Sorry, is it the shoes?
Computer AI on Saturn feels more normal to play against. For this reason, single players will likely have a better time on Saturn's Jam, while multiplayer with friends could be better on PlayStation thanks to the graphical flair. Kirby demonstratively has the upper hand at converting Jam's graphics, though I think Daz T has much more balanced computer AI, making Saturn's Jam more fun to play.
It's just my opinion, though. There's really no need to go spreading it around.
In that same email I mentioned earlier, I asked Kirby which of the two ports he believes is the best. He says, quote, "They're pretty much the same." I also asked, why is the AI so aggressive on the PS1 port? Kirby says he doesn't really remember why. You'd have to look at the code.
Fun fact.
Remember how Iguana is based in Austin, Texas? On the back of the Saturn box, there's a screenshot showing the Houston Rockets as the most popular team on whatever console this is being played on. They do have some pretty good stats.
So what does it take to be the ultimate champion?
Just a good feel for the game, understanding like the role of each player. Like, you shouldn't just chuck up threes with Karl Malone or anything like that.
So do that, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a lot of fun playing round after round on Saturn's Jam. Even though it's missing a few flashy bits, it still fulfills the #1 rules to remember about playing basketball. Like a good fighting game, the easy to learn is fun to master, opening up near limitless opportunities to develop your own strategies and experiment with your playstyle, and you don't get the jolt beaten out of you. I cannot stress this enough. Despite its weird graphics issues, Saturn's Jam is far from a bad port. Any Saturn owner will have a great time playing it, especially with 4 people. It keeps the 60-frame action in check. Daz T did a marvelous job making it play well and look good. He's just missing a few things Kirby was able to get onto the PlayStation. If I were a guessing man, I would assume the tight deadlines and a common lack of developer support from Sega of Japan might explain those minor shortcomings.
Man, there's not a ton of strategy to Jam, but like if you're ahead, there's definitely a different, optimal way to play.
Is that strictly because of the AI?
Yeah, I mean this game has some of the most intense rubber banding I've ever seen in any game.
The score is tied.
A close match is more exciting than a dominating win.
Oh shit.
For Midway, a close match also means more money. Each credit pays for a quarter of a game, so if you have 1 token, 1 player can play for 1 period. If you have 4, 1 player can play a full game, or 2 players can play for a half. So if 4 people want to play a full game in the US, they'd need $4.
You know, if you're trying to convince someone to pay for 4 quarters of a game, which is, you know, full dollar, They're not going to stick around if they're just creaming the other team or if they're getting their butt handed to them.
So to keep quarters pumping, the match needs to be close, all the time. This is done by giving the losing team a better chance at success.
So it's got a weighted system depending on like how many points you're up by. Every player has a base 3-point shooting ability, dunking ability, defense ability. When you are, it's a twofold rubber band system because when you're up, your stats go down, and when the other team is down, their stats go way up. So it's really hard to get a lead that's like more than 10 points.
You know, goaltending, shooting, layups, dunks, doinked dunks. Everything had percentages that boiled back and forth based on the score.
Turmel touched on this rubber banding at his GDC conference, explaining how the percentage of a particular move would go back and forth.
This bottom table actually kind of tells it all. 0 is when the score was tied. If the score is tied, then do no modification to your base number. But if you are losing, then it would slide to the left. I'm down by 1 point, 2 point. So we went all the way to down by 10 points. You can see a 25% additional add-on to the already 25% that was there for, say, in this example, 3-point shooting. And conversely, if you were winning up by 1, 2, 3, 4, those number of points, then it would modify. And so you could get down to the point where, hey, I'm a great 3-point shooter, but I just nullified you completely because you're up by 15 points.
Fun fact. To the dismay of his Chicago-based team, Turmel is a big Detroit Pistons fan. To spite them, he made it so the Bulls will always miss a buzzer-beater shot against the Detroit Pistons, regardless of the score.
Another?
Hell yeah. So it's a big part of the strategy, kind of gaming the AI almost?
A little bit, yeah.
All right, thank you. I think one of them stalled again. This one's slower.
In the arcade and on most console ports, you can adjust the levels of computer assistance, but turning it all the way down does not get rid of all rubber banding. Modern Vintage Gamer dove deep into the source code of Jam right after it got released on GitHub in early 2021. Take blocking, for example. A 14% modifier is added to a computer player's block skill if the score is tied. He found if the human player is up by 15 points or more, that modifier goes up to 50%. He found pushing and stealing is at 6% in a tied match, skyrocketing up to a fat 250% if the player's up by 15 points or more. Player skills are also upped if they're losing. If there's 5 seconds left in the clock in the fourth quarter and the player's shot will tie the game, there's a 75% chance it will go in. Doesn't matter how far away you are. Similar advantages are in play for the other periods, though the percentages are lower.
The best thing you can do here is, oh crap, not that, is honestly just like shoot it, because if it's in the air, no one's going to be able to rebound it.
Yeah.
So the next time your uncle's talking shit when he says this game cheats, tell him he's right. It would seem like this is nothing more than a crappy way to make more money, though a close match is more exciting than a dominating win. In my own experience as a player, these heated games keep my heart rate up, never letting a game feel like a snooze fest. It's a part of what makes Jam Jam. A big reason why you often find an audience crowding around the glow of the cathode ray to see who will win the next match. It's also the one thing people complain about. Ollie told me while writing his book, he wanted to find someone who hates NBA Jam.
Dude.
I want to find an NBA Jam hater. Like, who's somebody out there who is like, man, NBA Jam is trash. Like, this ruined games. This is garbage. This is overrated. And it was so hard finding anything.
He searched far and wide, in person, online, and in old message boards. The only negatives he could find were people bothered by the rubber banding, though they still didn't hate NBA Jam. So I took it upon myself to keep an eye out for the lone Jam hater. At the bottom of this Usenet post, an AOL.com email address holder wrote on November 12, 1995, quote, NBA Jam sucks anyway. Play some real games. Play on. There you have it, Ollie. I found a jam hater. Turmel himself said he got a lot of heat about this insane rubber banding. Perhaps no one was more upset about this than his coworkers, who he hustled more than fats on the felt.
People would come over and want to play a game for cash, for vending machine practice, whatever it was. And I knew, like, you know, what the numbers were. It's like, why are you trying to play me? It's like, so I was John Hay, you know, probably still owes me money.
To further tweak the AI, they kept a CMOS battery in every cabinet, storing gameplay data for that specific location.
How many times they go to the second period, how many times to the third period, how many people are buying a full game up front, what are the most popular teams, what's the score differential.
Which controller actually you were most likely to win from?
Which controller, right, to see if there was bias there.
Right.
I'm going with the local team to this area. I don't know if they're good in this game. Probably not.
Well, they are the 5th most popular team in this location.
Wonder why.
Fun fact. I proceeded to destroy the champion as the Wolves, finishing with a double-digit lead.
I win! Drexler! That's a lucky ball!
This rubber banding, of course, stuck around on console ports, even though the players at home don't have to pump quarters into plastic boxes. This is likely to keep the ports as faithful to the arcade as possible, while retaining that constant neck-and-neck excitement Jam is so well known for. Rubber banding is certainly on Saturn, appearing to act very similarly to the PS1 rubber banding. Of course, these AI rules must apply in those bonus modes. Like, take a look at this match. I'm about 20 points ahead, so that must mean I won't be able to score a single point for the rest of the game. Nope. 5, 9 points, 6 points, 6 again, swoosh. Watch this, I won't make this shot, there's just no way. Oh! Uh-oh! Nice, 100 points. Just to sprinkle on some extra salt. Rockets win. I never even stayed on fire this match. How about we juice it up to 4 X's? Whoosh! Look at my guy, look at my guy. Look at him go, just go zooming around. Then he shoots and stops. Alright, we about to play a special game. Don't mess with Malone. Malone has a power of 9. What we're gonna do is do nothing but shove. Don't mess with Malone. Get out of his way. Boom! Boom! My ball. Hey! Boom! Boom! Got him. Halftime for 34! Holy shit! You want the ball? You want the ball? You can have it. Sight! Boom! Uh-oh. Don't lose. Don't lose the game. Oh no! If you just push people and barely do anything else, you can win. Good game.
Are there people out there who, like, start out losing on purpose just to get good AI later on? Or, like, stall out, like, just a hair in second place? Like they're trying to avoid some blue shells in Mario Kart or something?
There definitely could be. It's definitely better to be up by, like, 8 versus 10. I don't know that people are, like, purposely, like, I'd rather be behind.
Like many 1995 Saturn games, the path to publication is rocky for NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Both ports were targeting their respective console launch in the States, according to Kirby. His PlayStation conversion made deadline, launching with the console. Daz T was initially shooting for the Saturn's September 2nd Saturn Day launch. Then Sega's infamous surprise launch hit on May 11th.
We all I think it was just, we thought it was a joke. I mean, because it, especially as the news come out, you know, there was only like 100,000 units and they were only going to certain stores. And now stores were just like refusing to like stock them. And it was like they've just shot themselves in the foot.
He said Sega inquired about the possibility of releasing Jam on this May 11th surprise launch. They were like, yeah, not gonna happen. So there's suddenly less pressure on Daz T to make it in time for September 2nd, since it's now no longer a console launch title. Going back in time with those good old Usenet posts, we can see Babbage's and other US game stores put Saturn's Jam on their upcoming release lists in August. They're marking it down for an early September launch, more specifically September 8th. That's one day before the PlayStation's console launch and the release of its Jam port. Early September rolls around, and the Saturn ports of both Jam and Mortal Kombat 2 get delayed. Note that while Acclaim is publishing both, MK2 is outsourced to Probe Software, not Iguana. Other posts talk about how these two Midway titles are both highly anticipated, and it's disappointing for Saturn owners who have to wait longer than PlayStation gang. Eventually, it came out on November 10th. Files on the disc show a last modified date of October 3rd, 1995. That's about a month after the first launch goal. A nearly identical prototype leaked to Hidden Palace has a build date of September 29th. Daz T already had a tight deadline to work with, and with his deadline getting borked by the surprise launch, it makes sense to take extra time to make his port. It looks like he finished it sometime in September, though like most 90s houses, Iguana and Acclaim needed several weeks to get it from prototypes to shelves. Remember, the internet isn't nearly as good as it is today, so sending hundreds of megabytes across the pond and getting it pressed is a much more lengthy process. Kirby remembers what this was like, not only for proto builds, but also for sending and receiving Redbook audio.
Stuck her on a plane, flew her over, while we were at the same time trying to send it via this like modem, direct connection modem. I was just like bonkers, like, now you can send it in reg, it'd take you a couple of minutes.
Many Usenet users picked up the Saturn port right away in November. They're saying the PS1 had computer difficulty problems that appear to be fixed on Sega's machine. As I mentioned earlier, I did notice the Saturn port has less aggressive and more balanced AI. Some also noticed the missing graphics that the PlayStation conversion does have. Though these players are less worried about the small details and more concerned with sharing cheat codes. It's tough to say how many copies were sold, though we can see many people on Sega's Usenet boards are talking about it in the 90s, and on modern-day eBay, North American copies are easy to find, priced pretty close to most of those slightly common popular titles. It might be no Virtua Fighter 2 or Sega Rally Championship, but it appears it did well. NBA Jam is a big name, and sports games sell to Western Sega fans. This is by far the biggest sports game to come out on the console so far, and even though it got delayed, it's just in time for the holiday shopping season. I can only assume this port was a commercial success.
Malone!
Weird thing though, the back of the Saturn's box says 1 to 2 players. This could deflect some buyers, since it's a known 4-player game. Despite this, the game itself works with 4 human players. Yeah, you can plug in the multitap and get it running fine, box be damned. This source says the multitap is out in October, possibly releasing that month. I can't find any American magazine reviews of Saturn's Jam. The closest I can find to a proper US write-up is this January 1997 issue of Next Generation, where they briefly review every Saturn game released so far. Hey, that's my idea. It's the 2-on-2 rough and rumble basketball game from the arcade. Delivering the high-flying dunk with the cream of the NBA crop still hasn't lost its edge. 3 out of 5 stars. That is all American magazine writers had to say about NBA Jam TE for the Sega Saturn. Dave's Old Saturn page from way back in the day has 3 submitted reviews, 2 from the 90s, 1 potentially from 2001. They all give it extreme praise. George Herney compares it to the PlayStation and arcade versions, considering the Saturn to be near arcade perfect. He notes, the Saturn is missing those camera flashes. As for the PS1 port, he agrees with me about the AI, saying the computer literally beats the crap out of you. It punches me too much. I punch it back too much. And after a while, it becomes a game of revenge. Score doesn't matter. All that matters is that I injured the computer players bad, real bad. It's not healthy. Well said, George. Posts and short reviews on Usenet also love the Saturn port, mostly preferring it to Kirby's Jam, though this is the Sega board, so there's some bias. One poster says he scored a copy from Best Buy for $46, calling it a good deal. So pretty much no US magazine reviewed this, just a few write-ups on the PlayStation port. But across the Atlantic, several European publications are giving Saturn's Jam buckets of attention. It came out for the Pal Pals in December of '95, about a month after its States release. The Danish Sega Magazine are giving it a 75%. Sega Pro in the UK gave it an 87, calling it a perfect conversion of a perfect sports game. Player One in France absolutely adored it, slamming it with a 92. We may be trusting the Brits with porting an American basketball game, but they sure seem to be appreciating it way more, at least in the case of Saturn. Over in Japan, the NBA is relatively popular. Sure, it's no Yaku, but it's celebrated enough to have Barkley and MJ on a Japanese game show. Saturn's Jam slammed in Japan in December of '95, getting positive remarks in the Japanese Sega Saturn magazine. Sam I Am translated these reviews for me. Thank you, Sam. Girl gamers say this will make NBA fans happy, complimenting the dunks and tempo on the court. But these ladies call the graphics underwhelming and say the team data is out of date. 6 out of 10. High rollers love the high-octane action, but believe the heads look a little enlarged, maybe inhuman. Still good enough for a 7. Guest writer Tetsu says it plays just like the arcade, but also just like every other port, with little difference to playing it on Saturn versus any other system. They also don't like the menus not being translated from English, and thinks the controls are bad. 5 out of 10. Maybe I found another Jam hater.
Slam Jam, thank you man, with NBA Jam Tournament Edition.
Mid-90s American video game show Twitch reviewed the PlayStation port.
When you play basketball, you want to jam. You play rough, shoot sweet, dunk hard, and collect special items to enhance your performance.
Like most of the stateside writers and journalists, all that 32-bit Jam attention is being given to Kirby's software. Even before these consoles came out in Western worlds, Kirby and Daz T both knew PlayStation was destined to stomp out the Saturn. Kirby tells me the writing was on the wall, and Saturn felt more like a continuation of the Mega Drive to him.
Even before it was released, we all had made our mind up. In the games industry, everyone had already decided what was happening. You know, it was sort of a feeling around the industry that this Sony thing was just going to be huge. And the Saturn, we'd all seen the specs, and it's just not there.
One major advantage Sony had was buying Psygnosis.
Because they bought Psygnosis, but what they really bought was SN Systems. SN Systems were the people who made all the tools for all the developers. Mm-hmm. So you get all our dev kits, like Genesis and SNES dev kit. They'd been making this debugger called Pro DG for years and years. It was fantastic. Everyone used it. And that's what they really bought. The Sygnosis thing was a separate, it's part of the deal, but they wanted the tooling. And that's why the tooling was so much better so quickly. Once Pro DG and SN Systems just turned their focus to PS1.
As for the British Iguana Boys, this project surely must have paid them a fortune. I mean, come on. The first Jam port sold 4 million copies.
We got paid it in wine to get round some taxes or something. So it was just madness.
So you weren't paid very well to do the port.
Oh no, we're paid great for northeast of England as an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
I think we're 20 grand or something a year.
20 grand a year. Assuming he's talking about pounds and not dollars, that's about 39,000 with inflation to 2020, roughly 54,000 US dollars in today's money.
Big Daft Kids getting paid silly money.
He doesn't quite recall how much they wound up getting in royalties, but for a less than 1 year deadline on a project that Acclaim knows will be successful, maybe that was good money for the Daft Kids. I don't know. Kirby didn't seem to mind, but I think they could have been paid a little bit more. He says the business is treating him well nowadays.
We're all professional. We're all old. We all have kids. No one sleeps under the desk anymore.
Did you sleep under the desk at Iguana?
Oh God, yeah. Why? Of course you would. Yeah, they're all daft kids. We all night. You know, there'd be a deadline. E3's coming. Just sleep under the desk. It's the easiest way. I think EA is still doing it. I think that's their
Really?
I don't think he's kidding. With no response from Tunnicliffe to myself or anyone else, it would seem that this is all there is to learn about Saturn's Jam. But while I was editing this video, I got a long-awaited reply from none other than the developer with the coolest name, Steve Snake. He's cracking this case wide open. Despite his last name representing a separate reptile, Steve Snake might be the busiest iguana in the UK terrarium. Opting to communicate via email, Snake tells me he worked on nearly every port of NBA Jam. He did not work on the ports for Master System, Game Gear, Game Boy, or Jaguar. He's hard at work on his Tense 32X conversion, while Kirby is putting together the PlayStation port. Snake says Kirby accepted a job at another game company mid-development, agreeing to stay with Iguana until his port is done. So on top of having an already tight deadline, Kirby is also trying to move on to Reflections Interactive.
Jackson! Ryder!
Kirby wraps up the port before Daz T finishes his Saturn Jam. He moves to his new job, and Iguana submits Kirby's final build to Sony. Sony rejects it. So Snake and Daz T spend some time fixing Kirby's problems. Snake says, quote, "He probably doesn't even know about that. Happy face." He reiterates to me, they were all under constant pressure to get these ports out ASAP. This, combined with the weird source code, makes Kirby's mistakes understandable. NBA Jam's arcade machine uses a Texas Instruments processor. Snake says, according to its manual, that processor is designed for washing machines.
No way!
Those fools are playing with a washing machine.
Had you
NBA Jam
ever ruined your clothes? It's your delicate cycle.
Despite the strange choice of appliance parts, Snake says Midway chose a powerful processor. But compared to every other CPU they're used to working on, everyone at Iguana calls it a weird CPU. To explain Kirby's mistakes, things are about to get a little technical. It's a little beyond my understanding, so we'll have to take Snake's word for it. Snake tells me NBA Jam's Texas Instruments CPU does not use bytes, just bits. There are 8 bits in 1 byte, so moving through memory 1 byte at a time requires adding 8 instead of 1, like in most other CPUs. Most devs are used to adding by 1, so this made the code difficult to follow when sinking into its meat. He says another big difference is how the processor compares values for greater than, less than, equal to, etc. It's done by subtracting one value from another, and seeing if its result is positive, negative, or 0. Snake makes it sound like this is not normal. He adds, it's not difficult to understand, but it's often not obvious which value is subtracted from which. It gets worse when using more than 2 values. This means converting the arcade code of NBA Jam to a console requires heavy concentration, lots of triple checking to make sure it really does behave like the original game. He said, quote, "Unfortunately, when you are Chris Kirby and you need to get the thing done ASAP so you can leave and start your new job, it's all too easy to see why mistakes can be made. It's easy to make these mistakes on a Jam port at all, and super difficult to find those mistakes after the fact. Quote, especially when you are on a deadline that already passed." Snake says this makes it easy to go what he calls code blind, checking the walls of code over and over and over. Snake would hand fixes to Daz T as he found them. Daz T would give his own fixes back to Snake, and eventually, they were confident and lined up with the original Jam code. Snake says these little mistakes are what caused Sony to reject Kirby's initial port, and they're also what caused the computer opponents on PlayStation to get so f***ing aggressive. Quote, "They're supposed to get more aggressive the better you play, but because various greater than less than checks were back to front, they actually start trying to kill you immediately, and they get worse. Happy face." These fixes Snake and Daz T made to the conversion also got into the Saturn port of TE, explaining why its AI is substantially less aggressive and closer to behaving like the arcade.
Deliver the face, Rodman!
Iguana gradually supplied new builds to Acclaim, able to release the US and European ports with a few minor bugs. But Sony of Japan had none of that. They want perfection. So Snake says the Japanese PS1 port of Jam plays like it does on Saturn.
No way!
These discrepancies are what caused most of their bugs. Quote, "I don't remember any other specific ones, but the most noticeable were all gameplay balance related, such as the aggressive players. Things like your chance of the ball going through the hoop were all wrong, etc. This absolutely explains why these ports were delayed, why they might feel slightly different, and why parts of them feel incomplete. Kirby does flex with his fire trail, looking outstanding on Sony's machine. Saturn's Fireball looks more like it does in the arcade, but with no transparency effects. Snake says the PlayStation can render transparencies faster, and Kirby had a lot of leftover rendering performance. So he went all out with the flaming ball. He believes a similar glorious blaze is possible on Saturn's Jam, but they were under pressure to get the game out quickly. I asked Snake about the Rob Northern compression. He refutes the notion that Kirby converted it, even though that's exactly how Kirby remembers it. Snake says Northern would convert his code to consoles, then sell those conversions to dev houses, quote, including PlayStation. It's tough to say who's correct, since Kirby's quote straight up implies he converted it himself.
So I said to Rob, you let me convert it, give me the source code, I'll convert it to PS1, and then you let us use it for free in NBA Jam, and I'll give you the source code for PS1, you can give it to everyone else.
This was also more than 25 years ago, and such memories tend to be hazy. He says a guy named Mike Chilton converted the Rob Northern compression code for SH2 processors, 32X and Saturn. Snake also believes the Saturn port does not use a tech demo. In the early days, the PS Dev Kit came loaded with loads of libraries, documentation for those libraries, and example code showing you how to use them, making it very easy to work with. Whereas the Saturn just came with a ton of manuals detailing the extensive hardware registers and nothing else. This is the main reason why people say the Saturn was hard to program. I think that's unfair, he says. Every system that came before it also just came with similar manuals. It's what we were used to. Of course, the Saturn had more of them. It could do a lot more than previous gen. It's just that Sony had made sure their system required next to no learning curve to get going, because at that point, nobody expected them to do well against Sega and Nintendo. It was a move that paid off, and the rest is history. I went ahead and burned up the Japanese version of PlayStation's NBA Jam to see if it really does play more like Saturn's AI.
What a shot!
And holy fish paste, Snake is right. Peep those injury stats on my guys. Does this look like PlayStation Jam? No, but it is. Computer opponents on this specific region variant are not overly aggressive. Its AI does appear to behave more like that of Saturn Jam. So based on this careful analysis, due to its graphical prowess, better sounds, and properly converted AI, I believe the Japanese version of PlayStation Jam is Iguana's best port. This is nuts. Kirby laid a quick foundation for the PlayStation port. Then Steve Snake, along with Saturn developer Daz T, gradually fixed its problems, given the time to polish a real treat for the Japanese audience. There's room for debate on whether it surpasses the legendary Jag port, but if you're fixing to slam it up on the PS1, go full weeboo and get the Japanese version. It's apparently better, and still has English text. There is no shortage of NBA Jam's famous cheats on Saturn. Big heads, quick hands, and even things like displaying the shot percentage. But the big star of the cheat show is the exhausting list of secret players. Remember, all they need are a few pictures of a person's head from different angles, then bah, they can be in Jam.
Like, it's basketball superstar Larry Bird!
You got the Clintons, classic. You can play as the Beastie Boys, Fresh Prince, and Frank Thomas.
The Big Hurt himself.
Various NBA personalities, Jazzy Jeff, Heavy D, and pretty much all of the developers.
Toward the very end of the process, of the development process, everybody from the team got together and they just stood in front of these blue screens and they had their headshots taken from, I think it was 8 different angles.
Our main man Kirby and Saturn brother Daz T, both in the game. J Moon, he lives on in Jam. Sonic Youth, yeah, they didn't work on the game, but they're in Jam too. Sonic? No beautiful blue blur.
And it's just like, turning, just like anybody could be an NBA Jam.
Anyone, you say?
I missed it just a little.
Nah, that'll never happen. The codes were something Turmel and the Midway crew really went ham over, and their fans, they ate it up like a Carolina barbecue.
Kids were selling, the codes for $5, $10,
Yeah.
and this is before the internet, and so it was tough to learn these things.
The port developers put in some of their own secret players here and there, though it often came down to how many could fit.
Like in the tournament edition, the home versions, everybody wanted to be a secret player in the game. And I was the guy who had to decide who was going to be the secret players. I only had so much memory, right? It got to the point where there was getting too many, and that everybody was submitting their name.
This NBA Jam ad featuring Playboy models as cheerleaders had some people begging for the cheat codes, unlocking them as characters. But those codes didn't exist. Turmel eventually caved, including the pom-pom wielding warriors in later revisions. Looking at the roster and secret characters, many basketball fans are left wondering, where the hell are these two guys? A couple of kings of the sport, nowhere to be found on Player Select. Shaq was probably busy licensing out his pinball table. You ever seen one of these? There's a moving basket for the silver ball. It's fucking sick. Rumors long foretold of there being a small amount of cabinets with Michael Jordan, one made for the NBA superstar himself. Turmel confirmed these rumors, saying there are a few MJ cabinets out there.
Is there a kill switch or some sort of weird way that the versions of the game with, for example, Michael Jordan would just somehow find their way to the rest of the world? I say that mostly from a historical preservation perspective.
There are EPROMs out there of NBA Jam with Michael Jordan. He was in the original game. I know Gary Payton has said recently, he's got it, he's shown it. I have EPROMs. I don't have a cabinet anymore, so I can't plug the EPROMs in to confirm they're still working, but it's on my list of things to do is to actually plug those in somewhere and test them out, and then I will be more than happy to release them.
Midway didn't have trouble getting most of the players they wanted, but a few, like Jordan, licensed out their likeness on a case-by-case basis. Remember, when Jam first came out, Michael Jordan retired from basketball and moved to minor league baseball. In 1995, he did go back to the NBA, but he didn't license out his likeness. At least not for NBA Jam.
Hit 16-bit era game, Michael Jordan, Chaos in the Windy City have anything to do with it not being in this?
Well, he must have given his likeness to be in Chaos in the Windy City. I was actually playing that for the first time last weekend. It's not that bad.
Looking back at their pitch video to the NBA, this early build footage shows 2 Jordans and 2 Barkleys on the court, so they definitely at one point put MJ in the game, seemingly with the intent to include him later on. Midway was about to put in Bart Simpson and Godzilla at one point. Ollie was able to dig up these videos. Developers are seen taking pictures of a Bart Simpson action figure so they could put his head in the game. Same thing with Big G.
They really had like kind of like a Wild West mentality. They're just like, well, you want to do it for fun? Do it. Throw it in there. We'll do it. And then they'll deal with the consequences later. Which, which is crazy, like the NBA.
Ultimately, these two were cut over copyright fears. Supposedly, not by the NBA, but Midway was afraid of the legal backlash. The cutting room floor dug up these player bodies in the code, presumably for Bort and the King of Monsters. Here's an unofficial rendering of what Godzilla playing basketball might look like. Keep in mind, all those other guys, most didn't know they were going to be in the game.
Like DJ Jazzy Jeff, he did not know that he was going to be in the game until a buddy of his was playing NBA Jam. He was like, hey, you're in this game, you know that? He's like, what?
One property Midway does have the rights to is Mortal Kombat. In the first 2 revisions of the arcade EPROM, 4 MK characters, including Raiden and Sub-Zero, are playable secret characters. You can enable fatalities with a cheat code. But the NBA demanded these two characters get pulled after Revision 2. I guess this was not part of that family-friendly atmosphere they were promised. But one of its most glaring oversights is not including Chairman Segata as a secret baller. He can look past this critical flaw, as well as not including the Saturn's unofficial American mascot. He sees this as a faithful conversion of the arcade's Tournament Edition. It might be missing a few small graphics, but it's fun to play, and the computer opponents passed their anger management courses. A multiplayer experience worthy of high honors on his wall. This basketball serenade is fondly remembered across most of its platforms, and it seems anywhere I look online, Daz T's conversion gets a lot of recognition. Forums, YouTube comments, social media, you'll find many people saying the Sega Saturn is how they played NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Many say it's their favorite, some believing it's the greatest port. Kirby's Jam gets all the mod treatment though. I've seen at least 2 well-played mods of the PlayStation port around the net. They patch in players like MJ and Shaq, fix some options, and adjust the AI. Sadly, no mods for the Saturn Jam at this time. Maybe someone on the homebrew scene will take it on someday.
NBA Jam Extreme looks real.
What doesn't get remembered as fondly is the oversaturation of NBA games after Jam, and the abuse of the brand after Acclaim took the NBA license.
And they took that commentary as like, oh, they don't want to do NBA Jam anymore. And so they gave it to Acclaim. So Acclaim garnered the rights when our contract expired for the rights to NBA Jam, and they just drove it into the ground. Here you can see an example of College Slam.
To be honest with you, at that time, you know, I think we were, I thought NBA Jam was dying, but people had enough of it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people felt that College Slam was just, you know, just asking for some a little more money on this franchise.
This beginning of the end did get a Saturn port in the States, so you can be damn sure we'll leap into this rabbit hole later on. Today, we can still visit this time machine of 90s basketball and culture. The magic of shoving dunks down a net with the ball on fire while burning the ropes clean off ages like a fine, well-sealed jam.
You just put your nuts on my forehead.
I went to a cinema to watch, I can't remember what the movie was, but before the movie came on, NBA Jam advert came on, I was sat there with my girlfriend, now wife.
Yeah.
Fucking hell, look at this.
In what is a rocky first year for the console's North American run, the Saturn finally gets a win. A faithful port of a popular game, targeting a mostly untapped group of Sega sports fans, and it's just in time for the holidays. A couple minor details are left out, but the 90s player base sees it as a cut above the rest. So next time you pop in NBA Jam Tournament Edition for the PlayStation or Sega Saturn, know these ports of an American treasure are built in the United Kingdom by a pair of big daft kids getting paid silly money. And Steve Snake. A big thank you to Pixel Brewing Company for allowing us to film on location. You can find them along NP Avenue just west of downtown Fargo, North Dakota. They feature locally crafted beers as well as 60-plus arcade machines like Zaxxon, Darius Burst, Windjammers, Galaga, and of course, NBA Jam. Another big shout out to Rayan Ali for sharing some of his own research, source videos, and interviews just for this review. You can find his book, NBA Jam the Book, in both digital and paperback forms on Amazon.
We're gonna finish this up. I'm making a crappy YouTube video. Hell yeah, that's right.
Bullshit. You make the highest quality Saturn videos of anyone.
Confronted by a fan in person.
That's right. Does Derek, I don't think Derek watches.
I'm out of tokens.
I can go get more.
All right. Now I'm mad.
Oh, get it in there. That's right. So is Craig Stadler an unlockable? Can you get him with the cheat code in this game?
Try to beat mine. No, what does he say? Try to get inside mine.
Think you can get it inside mine?
That's what he says. Inside his net. Great shot.
Right down the middle.
I wish there was a ROM hack where Craig Stadler is the announcer instead of Jim Bazinga.